you. Hello. Welcome, everyone. I know at least half of you are wondering, who the hell am I? And where is your beloved Paul Schenly, who ordinarily introduces Pianofest evenings? Please bear with me. I'm Robert Reeves, and I am the provost of the Stony Brook Southampton Graduate Arts Campus. And we are your neighbors. We are very close by, frequently in this building, and some beautiful buildings nearby. And we are hard at work building wonderful graduate programs in the arts, advanced training in the novel, short story, poetry, memoir, creative nonfiction, playwriting, directing, acting, screenwriting, filmmaking, and visual arts, plus a very distinguished literary magazine, the Southampton Review, which will be launched right here next on Friday, and I encourage you to come join us if you can. We also have over 400 talented faculty and students who have gathered here this month for programs we believe are as extraordinary as this one, Pianofest. Now this evening is the first time we have ever joined forces, these two highly regarded East End institutions in the arts. And it may seem a bit odd. I mean, how to explain this quirky circumstance that we have been in the same vicinity for so long, for so many years, and only now having this first evening together. Here's my analogy. My lovely wife Beth is here, and we have been married for some years after living many decades in Manhattan, and our lives together have been so wonderful that from time to time she is moved to say, Robert. She calls me Robert, other people call me Bob. I like Robert. She said, Robert, I wish I had met you 25 years ago. To which I reply, not necessarily. And the meaning there, of course, is timing is everything, and so it is with this. I did not meet Paul Schenly, the founder and guiding light of Pianofest, decades ago, but our paths have finally crossed, and here we are, so let us enjoy the moment. I attended my first Pianofest concert only last summer. It is hard to believe, but I knew immediately that we had to find ways to collaborate. After all, we were doing the same thing, gathering enormously talented students, recruiting the leading artists in the world to teach them, and in doing so, we are helping to ensure the future of art forms that we both love. At that first concert, what I saw was this, what many of you have seen so many times, Paul Schenly at work. And what he does in music is what I fervently hope we do in our pursuit of writing as art. He brings rigor, discipline, intelligence, and a commitment to excellence. And he also brings, and this is key, a humility, a warmth, and to his program, as we believe we do to ours, a sense of family. So those of you who care about Pianofest and those of you who care about Paul, I want to assure you that whatever happens following tonight, going forward, whether it is another date, courtship, even, who knows, a marriage, but whatever follows, I assure you that it will not be a one-night stand. So please welcome your friend, and I am very happy to say my friend, Paul Schenly.
Thank you, Bob. Can you hear me out there? I think we do have something special to present to you this afternoon, and I hope that this marks the first of what will be many collaborative concerts between Pianofest and the Writers' Conference. The schedule or the menu for this afternoon is that we have 4 pieces that are inspired by poetry or literary forms. And before you hear the piece, you'll hear the poem recited by the distinguished faculty of the Writers' Conference. And then after the performance, I'll come on stage and perhaps make comments about the music or the pianist. So now I'll invite the first readers.
Scottish ballad that we're about to read is a wonderful example of the form, a very sparse narrative of murder most foul, cast in the form of a question and answer session between a tragic hero and his Lady Macbeth of a mother. Every convention of the ballad is here the common meter that you might recognize from hymns or nursery rhymes or country western songs. The four-line stanzas and especially the refrain or the chorus, the repeated part, which takes up most of the poem. Why does your brand so drop with blood, Edward? Edward. Why does your brand so drop with blood, and why so sad go ye, oh?
Oh, I have killed my hawk so good, mother, mother. Oh, I have killed my hawk so good, and I have no more but he. Oh.
Your hawk's blood was never so red, Edward. Edward, your hawk's blood was never so red, my dear son, I tell thee. Oh.
Oh, I have killed my father, dear mother, mother. Oh, I have killed my father, dear, alas, and woe is me. Oh.
And what penance will ye dree for that, Edward? Edward, what penance will ye dree for that, my dear son? Now tell me. Oh.
I'll set my foot in yonder boat, mother, mother. I'll set my foot in yonder boat, and I'll fare o'er the sea. Oh.
And what will ye leave to your bairns and your wife, Edward? Edward, and what will ye leave to your bairns and your wife when ye go o'er the sea? Oh.
The world's room, let them beg through life, mother, mother. The world's room, let them beg through life, for them nevermore will I see. Oh.
And what will you leave to your own mother, dear Edward? Edward, and what will you leave to your own mother, dear? My dear son, now tell me. Oh.
The curse from hell from me shall ye bear. Mother, mother, the curse of hell from me shall ye bear. Such counsels ye gave to me. Oh.
Brahms was 21 when he composed this, and until then he'd composed much more rigorous compositions, much longer compositions, sonatas, and sets of variations. And now he was looking for something that could contain the substance of his composition that was a little more flexible, and he chose this to be his first piece. He wrote 4 ballades, and he pretty much follows the poem itself. He had a German translation of it by Herder, but here's the theme, and this is the mother talking, and when you hear this pattern, that's Edward, Edward. And this kind of imitation, almost like a chant, follows the poem very closely. And now, in a different key and slightly faster tempo, we have the first deceitful answer by Edward. And then back to the mother's questioning. And then the second deceitful answer. And now Brahms takes musical aspects of what we just heard and creates sort of a development of them, synthesizes them, combines the themes, and adds a new element. That's a fanfare, and it illustrates or signifies aristocracy, the nobility, fanfare of horns. So there you heard the piece, and during the narrative portions, you know, it would be a mistake. Come over here for a second. From a performance point of view, one wants something very objective. One wouldn't want a very impassioned rendition, because the ballade is something that's very objective. It's not a psychological analysis. If it describes a tragedy, like in Sir Patrick Spens, there's a hat that floats on top of the water, and the reader's supposed to surmise that, you know, the ship sunk and everybody on board drowned. And it's just signified very objectively in a narrative sort of way. And then in the middle section, Brahms creates the tragedy, and the second, it's an ABA form, and when it comes back, it's the same material that we heard in the beginning, but slightly modified. Thought you played it beautifully, Gleb. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The poem I'm going to read is by Thomas Wyatt, and I want to warn Paul Schenly and everybody that Julie Sheehan begged me to read a second poem. Actually, I asked her if I could. After this, a poem of mine, which is about the sonnet, but it won't take long. They're sonnets. Thomas Wyatt, 1503 to 1542, died 22 years before Shakespeare was born. So he was he was the first wave of English sonneteers. The sonnet, as you know, when professors say "as you know," they mean "as I know" and "you are about to." But the sonnet, as you know, was born by a cluster of poets, mainly Petrarch in Italy, then imported to England, practiced and became a national craze in England in the Renaissance, and then was perfected and temporarily killed by Shakespeare because he perfected it. In the poem, it is a lover's poem because the subject of the sonnet until Shakespeare was exclusively courtly love. It was much like the rock and roll music of the 50s and into the 60s was all about love, and then other subject matters were let in. And the kind of love the sonnet was exclusively about was courtly love. That is a situation with an unattainable, cruel, and beautiful woman who was called the cruel fair, her beauty being directly proportional to her cruelty. And the man is suffering love pangs. She is oblivious to him, and he, in many of these poems, is just trying to get her attention by being pathetic and presenting his love symptoms. And in this case, you will see a set of paradoxical love symptoms because he has fever, but he's shivering, and these contradictory symptoms are signs of love fever. I've anglicized the poem in just two places, in very small ways. I find no peace, and all my war is done. I fear and hope. I burn and freeze like ice. I fly above the wind, yet can I not arise. And naught I have, and all the world I seize on. That looseth or locketh holdeth me in prison, and holdeth me not, yet I can escape no wise. Nor letteth me live nor die at my device, and yet of death it giveth none occasion. Without eyes I see, and without tongue I complain. I desire to perish, and yet I ask health. I love another, and thus I hate myself. I feed me in sorrow, and laugh in all my pain. Likewise displeaseth me both death and life, and my delight is causer of this strife. My poem is just called Sonnet. All we need is 14 lines. Well, 13 now. And after this one, just a dozen, to launch a little ship on love's storm-tossed seas. Then only 10 more left, like rows of beans. How easily it goes, unless you get Elizabethan and insist the iambic bongos must be played and rhymes positioned at the ends of lines, one for every station of the cross. But hang on here while we make the turn into the final 6, where all will be resolved, where longing and heartache will find an end, where Laura will tell Petrarch to put down his pen, take off those crazy medieval tights, blow out the lights, and come at last to bed.
Thank you, Hunter. Very eloquent, passionate performance. When Liszt was about 30, or let me preface it by saying that Liszt was one of the most charismatic performers, and he was a man of great, and a performer of great virility, and attracted a lot of women during his life. And when he was 30, the Countess Marie d'Agoult left her husband and 3 small children to go with Liszt on an illicit, protracted honeymoon through Switzerland and Italy. And Liszt, who was also a very cultured person, used these pilgrimages or travels to inspire himself as an artist. He read, they went to all the museums and castles. Last week we heard a piece inspired, called the Dante Sonata, inspired by the Inferno. This is, as we heard, inspired by Petrarch. And yes, it is a poem of violent antithesis. And I hope, I fear, I freeze, I burn. And it's also about the ambiguity between adoration and hostility, or between love and hate. And why don't you just start it again? And you can see that right away it starts as almost a spasmodic passion, spasmodic energy. And this kind of cruel melody where we hear it the first time and then we hear the answer almost saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." So let's hear the theme. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, the cruelty. This was also written at a time when the piano sort of came into its own. For the first time during Liszt's life, and it was the Romantic period, the piano was built with an iron frame so the strings could have much more tension, and the action was improved so that the keys could repeat much more quickly. And so a lot of this flashy virtuosity is possible for the first time because of the advance of the instrument. And where's that repeated D sharp? Oh, okay, can you play that? So this kind of flashy trill with the sound jumping out at you was something that was so novel and that composers and audiences were mesmerized by it. And can you play the last page? When Hunter played it for me for the first time, he played this very sweetly. And I pointed out to him that what Liszt really meant, bitch. So that, to think about. Now we'll hear a movement of a Mozart concerto, and while it's not inspired by any particular poem, Mozart always thought in terms of the voice and in terms of opera. At the time that he wrote this concerto, he was writing the Marriage of Figaro. And in the movie A Woman's Face, Joan Crawford was asked, what kind of music do you like? And she said, some symphonies, all concertos. And you'll see why, because you can see visually that there's a drama between the soloist and the orchestra, or in this case, the second piano. And composers were drawn to the possibilities, the dramatic possibilities of contrasting a small group of players against a larger group. And this occasionally became more and more extreme until finally it was one person against the whole orchestra. So it pits the sonority of the soloist against the orchestra. I'll just let you hear it now. Performed by Cahill and Kyle. Thank you, Cahill. Thank you, Kyle. You can hear in this music that somehow Mozart represents an era of social prosperity and peace that we could never capture again, I don't think. I thought the performance was very loving and just wonderful. I loved it. Just a note about Mozart's situation. Whereas Haydn, who was a contemporary of Mozart's, was able to find patronage with rich nobility like the Esterházys, it was a time where the world was changing, where power resided in the ownership of land, and the middle class hadn't quite formed yet. And with the middle class came the transference of power through currency, through money. And Mozart was never able to sell enough of his publications or enough of his music to be comfortable in general. It was Beethoven, after Mozart, who was the first person to be able to support himself selling his compositions. And a word on cadenza. You may have noticed that there was one point about 3/4 of the way through where the pianist played a solo without the orchestra. That's called the cadenza, and it came from the time when singers would have roles, and they wanted to, well, they're prima donnas. So when the orchestra landed sometimes on an inconclusive chord, the singer would add these little twiddly bits that weren't written in the music. So soloists took this and made, Cahill wrote his own cadenza for this concerto that you heard, and I thought it was fitted beautifully.
According to Baudelaire, Aloysius Bertrand invented the prose poem. So what you're going to hear in Ondine are 5 sentences rather than stanzas punctuated by refrains. An Ondine, by the way, is a water spirit that you see in Germanic folklore. This particular one, is up to no good. attempting as she is to lure mortal men to the watery graves. Naturally, the faithful male speaker rebuffs her seduction.
Listen, listen, it is I, Undine, adorning your moonlit windows with melodious water droplets. I am here, in a moire gown, the queen nymph, who from my castle balcony gazes on the starry night, the sleeping lake. Each wave is a sprite who swims in the stream. Each stream winds a path toward my palace. And my palace is built of water, at the bottom of the lake, in the triangle of fire, earth, and air. Listen, listen. My father slaps the water with a green alder branch, and my sisters enfold with their arms of foam the islands of fresh grass, of water lilies and cornflowers, and tease the broken down bearded willow who tugs his fishing line.
Her melody sung. She begged me to accept her ring on my finger, asking me to be husband to a queen and to go with her to her palace, to be king of her lakes. And as I replied that I love a mortal, sullen and spiteful, she cried some tears and burst out laughing and vanished in a shower that streamed white down the length of my blue-stained glass windows.
It was a beautiful, shimmering performance. Ravel consciously set out to write the hardest piece that had ever been written for piano. That was his stated aim. And this is the very, very opening. Would you just play the opening tremolo? This is a kind of a vibrating tremolo, and it holds the whole piece together in some form. Just start the piece. And it's not just a simple trill like that, but it's completely irregular. So and that goes through the whole piece. It's a tremendous feat of concentration and coordination. And I think the main point to make about this piece is that suddenly the piano becomes a vibrating instrument. With the other composers, it was more of a singing instrument. Here, Ravel is capturing the sound of the music and also the sound of the light reflecting off of the water. And there's a huge splash in the piece with concentric circles getting wider and wider and wider that Ravel does with arpeggios. Anyway, thank you, Susan, for a beautiful performance.
Francois Villon was the original bad boy of poetry, it says here, always broke and in trouble with the law. He nonetheless produced peerless ballades. The ballade is very different from the ballad. Ballades don't tell stories, and they have a different, more intricate rhyme scheme and meter not attempted in this translation, alas. And they also have an envoi at the end, a short double-time stanza that traditionally addresses a royal patron to summarize the poem. Both ballads and ballades use refrain, in this case, warmly welcomed, always turned away, which gives you an idea of the paradoxical self-contradictions that drive this wonderful poem. That means that this guy is begging for the patron to provide the money for the poem that he is about to present. So, in case, yes, just in case, this is where it goes. And he's hoping that this will be entertaining. So here we are, Ballade, I die of thirst beside the fountain, cut version. I die of thirst beside the fountain. I'm hot as fire. I'm shaking tooth on tooth. In my own country, I'm in a distant land. Beside the blaze, I'm shivering in a flame. Naked as a worm, dressed like a president, I laugh in tears and hope and despair. I cheer up in sad hopelessness. I'm joyful, and there's no pleasure anywhere. I'm powerful and lack all force and strength, warmly welcomed, always turned away. I never work, and yet I labor to acquire goods I don't even want. Kind words irritate me most. He who speaks true deceives me worst. A friend is someone who makes me think a white swan is a black crow. The people who harm me think they help. Lies and truth today, I see they're one. I remember everything. My mind's a blank. Warmly welcomed, always turned away. Merciful Prince, may it please you to know I understand much and have no wit or learning. I'm biased against all laws impartially. What's next to do? Redeem my pawned goods again? Warmly welcomed, always turned away.
Bravo, Loanne, for this very dramatic and deeply felt performance. I'll just say a word or two about the ballade. This opens almost like a Greek tragedy, where perhaps you could imagine at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, the wizard. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a terrible tale to tell you of death and woe and a beautiful princess. And then this kind of poetic stanza. And all this music, which you captured beautifully, it's about Poland. Chopin was in exile, and we don't know the exact poem that this represents, but it deals with the supernatural. It deals with past sorrows. It deals with a word that Chopin called Zal, Z-A-L, which is a kind of misery and sadness and pain. And sometimes we don't know what the music exactly represents, but we know that Chopin is always, that was the revolutionary etude, sort of. It's about that. It's about rebellion, uprisings, and it's about the fact that Poland was invaded. And Chopin could have gone back to Poland, but he never did. So perhaps being in exile was a necessary part of his makeup or composition. I don't remember for sure, but I think Dante was in exile also. So some people compose better when they're under some kind of duress. Thank you, Loanne. Take a bow. We know that music is supposed to bring people together. Here's a piece that really brings the people together. We'll hear Lavignac Galop. to all the wonderful artists for sharing your art with us as well. And thank you, Bob Reeves, for everything.